Well, Brandon, we're heading into our 5th year of homeschool this year. You're heading into your what, 5th month? Is that what you said?
Basically, yeah, it'll be our first, second semester, basically, yeah.
So I don't think either of us would call ourselves experts, but I'm really glad to be joined by Brandon from Made to Homeschool. We're going to talk about their Brave conference coming up just not, I don't know, a few weeks away. We want to make sure you can get an early bird ticket and you can join us there. But Brandon, I titled this podcast Why I Wouldn't Choose Homeschooling. Again, I don't like to be too clickbaity, and it's the truth. And so let's talk about that for a minute. And then we are going to talk about navigating the early years as a homeschool parent, especially if you find yourself thinking about if you'd be good at it or not. Both of us would say we wouldn't put ourselves in the good at it category. So if I could take you back 5 years ago, the reason we chose to homeschool, it was something we had been kicking around. Our kids were in public school. We were actually having a really good experience with it. And I don't say actually, I love teachers. I think teachers are some of the most selfless, skilled human beings on earth. And we adored the teachers at our children's school. And then, like many, we found ourselves in this season of our culture, of what was going on at the time. And I felt like the school district we were in started making decisions really quickly. It felt like they wanted to be on the forefront of pioneering social changes and things that were going on. And I am not actually against all of that. I love people. I love everyone, and I want everyone to feel comfortable at school. I want them to feel included. And also, I felt like the parents were not involved in the conversation, and our kids would come home and they were like, "Guess what happened today?" And we were like, "Oh, we had literally had no idea."
Mm,
And so I don't talk about this often because, like I said, I love teachers. I think a lot of schools are doing so many things right. And I don't think homeschool is perfect either. And I've been
mm,
equally offended by things that my kids have come home and told me that they talked about at their homeschool co-op
mm,
too. But for us at the time, it's always been important that we feel that we have an equal or greater voice in our kids, the development of their value system, as the other adults around us, whether it's at school or church or co-ops. Or we just wanted to feel like at the end of the day that we had as much or more influence in the development of that, especially during really young years. And so we decided in 2020, we brought our 4 kids home. Well, 3 were only in school at the time. It was I won't use the term. It was a show though. Those first couple of years, um, it I didn't know what I was getting into, right? And so we were 3 kids, and then Gage would start in the fall, so it was kindergarten through 5th grade. And, it was rough, to say the least. The only peace of mind was that we knew what the public school was navigating at the time, or even private schools, was equally as rough. So I'm like, I felt like that took kind of the pressure off. And I really feel like it wasn't until year 3 or 4 that I actually felt like I knew what was going on, and that, I had a grasp on it. So that kind of takes us to where we are today. If there was another option in our community besides homeschooling, I would probably choose it because I still don't feel that good at it. It's not something I'm necessarily passionate about. And I've really had to lean on the community, the tribe around me, to create a good experience for our kids. So we can talk a little bit about that as we go. But again, you have started a Made to Homeschool community, which is so cool. We'll make sure we put details down below. Tell us a little bit, how did you jump in? Because again, you weren't necessarily one that just knew from birth on that you were going to be a homeschool dad.
No, yeah, and Don, thank you one so much for having me. Two, I guess for discussing the controversial thing when I get on here. But yeah, so we 5 years ago, you're talking about is when you made the decision. Makes perfect sense everything you're saying. No, I wasn't. I was not anticipating homeschooling until at all, really. So I was a full time pastor at a church in South Florida. My wife worked in medicine, which means she always made and would always make more money than me, right? So like that just wasn't in the cards because one of us would have to be home, and that wasn't going to happen because she wants to be home with the kids. She's always wanted that. She wants to like
Mhm.
grind grain and organize things and raise babies. And I'm like, cool. I work for Jesus, right? So it wasn't in the cards. Then as time went on, a lot of things had us less satisfied with the education system, and we had our kids in I think I told you, in a private school, but people are everywhere and people are people. There's always issues. It was when some crazy health stuff knocked me out of full-time ministry and I started working with a whole bunch of homeschool families online that we started, I think, I say drinking the Kool-Aid, but I think really it was a lot of our preconceptions and our natural objections, the most common ones, socialization, how do you teach things if you're not a teacher? All those
Mhm.
questions, they
Mhm.
started to get answered
Mhm.
just from exposure. We started spending time around homeschooled families and we're really impressed by some of the kids. And now I think what people oftentimes think is, well, I've known some folks that grew up homeschooled in the 90s and they're super awkward.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yep.
Also, I know a lot of people who weren't homeschooled and they're still super awkward.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And so we had this different experience. And I think just like with anything you haven't spent time around yourself, when you get exposure to it, it changes your perceptions.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so we had some exposure that changed our minds on that. And so when we finally made that decision, suddenly, a few months ago, we had committed to figuring out. Luckily, and we'll come back to this, we have all the help we'll ever need. We really
Yeah.
do. We have like
Mhm.
these 20 contributors who are part of Made to Homeschool. They answer all of our questions and tell
Yeah.
us what to do, basically, right? So I love that you said ahead of time, I'm not an expert. I'm not. I do not profess to be one. I am just figuring it out as
Mhm.
I go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so good, and I am grateful there are so many resources now around us that have in well, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because in one way, it's never been easier for anyone to start homeschooling, and then on the other hand, it can be very overwhelming
Daunting.
navigating all of it. So I had 2 close friends that homeschooled, and they intimidated me though because they were, like, career homeschool moms, right? Like, they started at birth. I mean, their kids probably knew how to read when they were 2 and a half, like, they were already planning the kids', high school classes when they were in 4th grade, and so I kind of felt like, "I'm never gonna be like you." Right? And for a little while, I was okay with that. I'm like, "It's okay. I'll make my own way." And then but there were days I'm like, "I feel so inadequate," and they're talking about end of year testing and all this, and I'm like, "I had no idea. I didn't know, like, they had to do that." So, do you what would your encouragement be to parents that are thinking about it, who are kind of in that same camp of like, "But do I really have what it takes?"
Well, since we're doing semi-controversial today, I would say I'm about to upset like a whole bunch of people, though, Don. All right, because
Just be
everybody
honest, yeah.
gets great, super good. Everybody gets so polarized on these subjects.
Mhm,
5, 6 months in, what I would say from my experience is the most valid universal argument for homeschooling also provides us with a lot of opportunity for nuance in that conversation. I think that the argument that almost no one would disagree with is that class size matters, right?
mm,
Class sizes matter. Okay.
yeah,
So if you can have your 8-year-old, let's say, in a class of 30 versus 20 versus 15 versus 5, just because of how division works, that the
mhm,
teacher's going to have more time with that child.
yeah,
And more individualized instruction is basically always better.
mhm,
That's the thing that has stunned me is now that you have a class size of 1, 2, 3, however many children you have, right?
mhm,
We can talk about your preparedness as a teacher, but the bottom line is you know your kid better
yeah,
than that teacher does. You
yeah,
have the ability to have a one-on-one interaction. And I'll think back to the first week we were homeschooling. My son, we were using the same curriculum he had. We were using these workbooks, and it was going through weights and measurements in the kitchen. And it was like learning about ounces, cups, pints, quarts, gallons. And so he's looking at the page like, Daddy, I don't understand. And so I took my son into the kitchen and I pulled out some mason jars. I
yeah,
said, this is a cup. This is this many ounces. This is a pint. This is this many ounces, quart, gallon, etc. Got it instantly.
yeah,
So what I would say is a humongous percentage of your concern about being able to homeschool has to do with just you parenting. Homeschooling is more about parenting than it is about being an educator.
yeah, that's true, but that actually intimidates a lot of parents too because, I mean, for many of us, stress and anxiety are running rampant, and we actually kind of look forward to the break in the day when the kids are at school. So do you feel like it has strained your relationship with your kids at all?
Okay, so I'll upset maybe you and then a whole bunch of other people too. I don't. I think my relationship with my kids is the best it's ever been.
Yeah.
That shocks me because okay,
Mhm.
I'm a homeschool dad. That's super rare, and for good reason probably. But like I like running a business. I like working with adults. I was never a kids pastor. I worked with adults even then in church, right? So I don't. That's not my thing.
Mhm.
But I spend more time with my kids when they're like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and not exhausted from the day.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
changes things.
Yep.
But I will also say, this is where I upset like at least half the homeschool world. If you don't want to homeschool your kids, don't homeschool your kids.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
I'm not here to twist an arm,
No.
none of that. Like
Mhm.
don't do a thing you think is going to be bad. If you're interested in it, maybe go with, hey, maybe there are misconceptions I have about homeschooling and what it looks like,
Mhm.
and talk to somebody who does it.
Yeah.
Somebody who seems to be doing it well, by the way,
Yeah. Mhm.
and ask them what their actual day looks like and have a
Mhm.
conversation and go be around them
Yeah.
and see what it really is. I think people have this perception that they're going to spend a whole day every day. They're going to put desks in their house, right?
Mhm.
And they're going to go through all the, honestly, for like elementary age kids, and I think Don, you know this, if you're doing like 2 hours,
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
that's a lot,
Yeah.
but that's more than they're doing in the school too. Like
Yes. When you
more
add up
direct.
the productive time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's not like I don't have an absolutist stance on this. I have
Mhm.
a what's going to be best for you and your family.
Yeah. No, exactly. And we, our 3rd child, our, son, he really struggled with reading to the point where we're like, "Is there some dyslexia or something going on?" And they would test him, "No, there's nothing," and but he could tell he was getting further and further behind, and other kids were he was in 2nd grade at this point, were reading things and not him. And so there was a lot of value when we could bring him home, and then now him and I work on it. We're not comparing. It could just be a very relaxed environment. We did find out he has dyslexia. We've been able to work through a program together, and it's been awesome. And there's been something about, yes, us having that time together, conquering this together, that has been very cool for our relationship. And also there are days where I'm like, I don't want to do the program with him today, right? Or he has a crabby attitude, right? And so it's 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 awesome, but we had those crabby days too. And I did often feel like when they were going to school, I always felt like the teachers were getting the best part of their day. I'm like you said, I'm like, oh, the teachers get like when they're in a good mood and they're rested and everything. And so I definitely agree with you there. What would you say though to the mom who wants to homeschool but feels guilty they can't? For it's not, I mean, I feel very fortunate that it is an option for our family right now. What would you say to the parent that just it really isn't an option right now, so they feel
Yeah.
guilty about that?
That's such a good question, and I think that we don't say anything to them so often. I would say 2 different things. One of those would be something like, "It might be more possible than you think, so do explore and ask questions." That's one. I know it's not the
Mhm.
the heart of your question,
Mhm.
but I didn't think we could. I was
Okay.
convinced we could not. So, like, I was shocked that we could.
Mhm.
There are some amazing accounts of people out there who are working full-time at home. I don't know how they're doing it, outside the home and homeschooling. People do it. I don't know.
Mhm.
But I would also say, homeschooling is not about a program, it is about parenting. And if you are taking time intentionally with your children when you have them,
Mhm.
and it's not just academic, but you're teaching them things, when you're driving in the car and your kid says, "Mommy, what's a dairy?" Because you drive by one, or
Mhm.
you go, "Daddy, what's that truck on the side of the road?" And you tell them, you're teaching them. And I know that
Yeah.
sounds super oversimplified, but when you take intentional time to convey knowledge to your kids, you're educating them. And
Yeah.
so yeah, maybe there's some gaps in their education at school that you feel are there. We all there's the whole like sentiment of like, oh, we don't talk about how to balance a checkbook. We don't talk about how to do
Yeah.
taxes. Yeah, totally agree. Teach them that stuff,
Yeah.
right? There are
Mhm.
things you can teach in the time you do have,
Mhm.
and I think it's not super beneficial for us to spend a lot of time agonizing over things we can't fix.
Yeah. That's
And
good.
so I would say don't beat yourself up. You're probably doing the best you can.
Yeah. No,
I'd
that's good.
encourage you to keep it up and do maybe look more intentionally at the time you do have, but
Yeah.
don't beat yourself up.
Yeah. Well, and I really have had to bring in others around me because I do work full time
Yeah.
and I love it. Like I've said before, I'm like, well, I would rather make YouTube videos than homeschool, right? And then I feel like I shouldn't be saying that because obviously our kids are the most important thing. And also I love what I do, right?
But I
And
agree
so
with you. I would
yeah,
too.
yeah. So my mom helps. She takes the kids a couple of times a day and or times a week and goes to their house, and it's good for them too. They get a change of scenery and they do some school with her. We have a gal from our church that even like today, she's taking them to piano lessons in the library, which has been so helpful. And so I tried early on. I'm like, I can do it all, right? And it was not enjoyable for me. It wasn't enjoyable for the kids. And so now thinking a little more creatively about it has really helped. So I do the parts that I want to do with them, and or that I'm best at with them, and then we can rely on others. And I wouldn't have considered that probably earlier on, but I'm so grateful now that we have others that we can rely on too.
And I think that's super smart, right? Like in the school, one of the good things about it is a diversity of experiences. And so, like, we're probably going to farm out or outsource, I guess, one or two subjects
Hmm.
this coming year with a video course, maybe, or an online component. And that's okay.
Yeah,
And my kids are not on me all day. They kind of want to be sometimes. So they understand that daddy has to work. Please, the door is closed. Come, hold on,
yep,
kids.
yep,
Right. And they're of an age where, and we have a fenced in backyard, they can go play for like a
yeah,
long time. And it's
yeah,
actually really good for kids to do that.
yeah. Hmm.
So, yeah, I love that you're kind of diversifying what their day looks like. And I think that's
Hmm.
a good option for people because I was afraid I was
Hmm.
going to be sitting with my kids at a table all day.
Yeah.
And I'm not. I barely do that.
Yeah, and we rely on co-ops now too. I'm grateful we live in an area where there's an abundance of co-ops that we can choose from, and that has been really great both for just getting out around other kids, but then yes, I mean, I don't teach language arts. That has never been my skill set, and so they can go learn, and many of the instructors at the co-ops are trained teachers, and they enjoy it. Like, they really enjoy teaching these things to our kids, and so that has been huge. And also, though, like I said, there are times they come home from something they learned at co-op or in their world view class, and I'm like overhearing their homework or something they're listening to, and I'm like, hey, let's talk about that, right? And so I don't. I think I also don't always like to align myself with the whole homeschool world, because while there's many things that I think are beautiful and I love about it, there are times too where I feel like, well, that's a little close-minded, or that's a little divisive. And so then I'm like, hang on a second, I don't want to go that far with this, and that we still have to talk about things with our kids. So it's not perfect. And I think that's maybe something we learn as we get older. Like, nobody has it all figured out in any realm or knows everything.
Yeah, and I think that that's so key there too, and that's part of what led us into Made to Homeschool is seeing, there were a few of as I got to know homeschool families, we loved the intentionality of them. We loved that they were like, "No, this is my child and I have the ability to, or we can make some sacrifices to homeschool and therefore invest in their development in a way that we would not have otherwise." I love that. It's beautiful. But we also saw a whole lot of division that I couldn't stand. And
Mhm.
it was division made up of and look, some things are absolute. I'm very strongly opinionated, but like my opinions don't need to be everywhere.
Yeah.
But we saw people being divisive in the homeschool world around like, hey, this is the only correct way to homeschool your kid, or
Mhm.
no, this one is, and they are bad parents. Ugh, nobody needs that.
Right.
But in reality, most homeschool parents who aren't like social media influencers aren't espousing this very rigid thing. You only
Mhm.
espouse this very rigid thing if you have some skin in the game.
Mhm.
And the skin in the game is I produce this curriculum, or I
Yeah.
run this community, or I teach you how to do this methodology for 9.99, 99.99 three times a week, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a place where you could just be like, hey, I'm figuring this out.
Mhm.
I want to learn from all of you and take what works for me.
Yeah.
That's what we wanted to build.
Yeah, I love that because I was surprised, and I think that's why I felt like it took me, like, 3 years to get a good grasp on it. Again, we were bringing 4 kids in, so there was that factor too. Um, I was surprised how much trial and error there was with different curriculums and resources. I thought because, a homeschooling mom I trusted would be like, "Oh my goodness, you have to try this. This is the best. Oh, your son's not reading? For sure. Just do this and you'll have him reading in 2 weeks?" And so then I would buy it and I'm like, "Oh, it's a little expensive, right?" But
A
I'd
little.
buy it and we'd try it and I'm like, "What is wrong with me that this is not working for us, and we're not just like having these beautiful moments around the kitchen table and everyone's frustrated." And so there were things that I had spent quite a bit of money on early on that I ended up jumping ship on, and I just had to be like, you know what, sunk cost, right? But keeping it is not going to make it work. There are things that work better for different kids, and so it's amazing the wide variety of resources now that we pull from. But it is really cool being able to pick out just the right things for each of our kids.
Yeah, the individualization opportunity is tremendous. We went to the big Florida homeschool convention a few months ago, May, and we took our kids. We'd never done that before, right? And I was doing a lot, I was working most of the whole time, honestly, working on the conference stuff, talking to vendors. But we also looked at curriculum for my son for 4th grade, and we looked at what he had to use the last year. It was fine. And then, but somebody's going to comment and tell me I'm a bad dad for this. But we took him to a couple booths to look at different options for math for next year, right? And he picked one that he liked. We curated the options. We gave,
Yeah.
hey, you can choose this, this, or this. What do you think about these, buddy? And he's like, oh, I like this one. Okay, my son's going to be much more excited to do math next year
Yeah. Right.
because he got to help choose how he
Yeah.
learns,
Yeah.
and that's a really cool thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. So tell us a little bit more about your community made to homeschool, and then we'll talk about the Brave conference coming up too, because it actually looks really awesome, especially if you're still trying to figure out if this is the best fit for you. So how did Made to Homeschool come about?
Yeah. So after I was no longer working in full time pastoral ministry, we started helping content creators, business owners with YouTube growth. And we were like, yeah, this is it. This is a thing we've got a skill set for. We can help with the production and the positioning and adding value and scripting out talks and outlines and all. We can do these. It's great. And we asked for, like family friendly Christian clients, and I got clients so much, yay, but they were like all homeschool moms on YouTube, which I didn't. I was like, Lord, that's not what I meant. Um, but they were awesome people,
Yeah.
and they became friends. And as we were starting to explore that world, we saw an opportunity for a place that would become Made to Homeschool, but we didn't see anything like it. Everything
Mhm.
was either run by a curriculum company, no shade, fine, that's your business,
Yeah.
but like you couldn't be part of that community unless you're using that curriculum.
Yeah.
And then you got to use all their curriculum, or it's like a thing run by a conference company, but
Mhm.
like they're primarily a conference company and therefore it's just an advertising opportunity. No shade, that's okay, but by definition none of those could be community first. We're big community people.
Mhm.
We think community really legitimately matters and we're made for it. And
Mhm.
so we reached out to a few former clients and we're like, hey, here's an idea we have. Don't know how we do it, but they loved the idea. They thought it was terrifying and couldn't be done. So that took that as a personal challenge. And they started reaching out to other homeschool mom friends on YouTube, Instagram, TikTokers, all the things. And we built a platform called Made to Homeschool, and it's
Yeah.
community where you can talk about any subject related thereunto or just
Mhm.
family life, and actually get like encouragement and support,
Yeah.
because most things are like on Facebook or
Mhm.
something like that, and some people just don't want to do that. And sometimes Facebook can be difficult,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do way more than that. We wanted to resource people. We wanted to be a place where every homeschooler, regardless of your educational approach, regardless of your life stage, regardless of what is going on with your kids, whether they're super highly performing academic, whether there's significant special needs, all of it could be addressed. And we
Mhm.
have people on our team who can address all those things. And then we have always wanted to do a conference, and we'd love to do some in-person stuff one day, but also it's psychotically expensive to do in-person stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, not just for the company, but for like the attendees.
Yeah.
But what can we provide to people now instead of waiting years until we can build a huge thing?
Yeah.
That's what led us to the Brave conference. Again, we asked the moms what we should title it, and that's why the moms,
Yeah.
they wanted to do something that was really focused on the fact that we all have some next season in our lives, whether that's approaching maybe homeschooling or like the next homeschool year. I've got a 4th grader. I don't know how to deal with that, right? Like, what do you do with the 4th grade boy? I don't know. I got to figure that out. Or starting to homeschool high school, or you are
Mhm.
just starting to homeschool your child with some special needs.
Yeah.
That is going to take some courage. It's something
Mhm.
for which we will all need a little bravery. That's where the conference name came from. We're
Yeah.
cheeky people. We like it that way.
Yeah. No, I love that, and I mean, so many moms would love to go to a conference in
Yeah.
person, but like you said, logistically or finding someone to watch the kids or all the costs. I love that you're offering this online, and I love everything you offer inside your community too, because it can get very lonely being a homeschool mom. I mean, really, there's no shortage of social things to do and whatnot. We've been very pleasantly surprised by that. Socialization is not an issue, right? In fact, most days I'm like, "Can we just stay home today?" You know? But you are always navigating a new season, and so you are needing to learn new things, and so I love the workshops and the different opportunities to network and get together live, that you offer within your community, and, but for those, like you said, either deciding if this is the right next step for them or heading into a new season, we do want you to join us at the Brave conference. I'm getting to do a session on decluttering your homeschooling space, which, Brandon, I mean, I like now that I know more about like visually how overstimulating our world is, we have to really pare things back in our homes and especially our homeschool space for our kids to be able to focus, concentrate, be productive. And so it's very counterintuitive. Kind of, you said this earlier on, like, I think I need desks and a world map and I need colorful things all over the walls. That's what school is like, right? And it's like, actually, I would challenge you to take it all down and let your space rest for a week or so, and then very intentionally put stuff back up. And you might take a whole different approach with it, right? So I'm glad to get to share about that. But man, tell us a little bit more about the lineup of speakers that you have at the Brave Conference.
We've got some awesome speakers lined up. Andrew Pudwa, the founder of IEW, is going to be on there. And we've got Aaron Lynham, Min Wong, Pam Barnhill. I can't. There are 19
Yeah.
speakers. Plus, that's not to mention 4 different panels. We're going to have a whole bunch of other speakers on those.
Yeah, I love panels. Panels are the best.
It's so
Aren't
like
they?
live interaction.
Yeah, I love panels. Okay, go
Whenever I
ahead.
would do conferences in the church, I would try to tell people, hey, keep your talk really short.
Yeah.
Because people, they love you, but they don't want to hear from you the whole time. They
Yeah,
want
we
to
have short attention spans.
right. And like
Yeah.
everybody's favorite subject is themselves. So we intentionally really tried to build in a couple things. One, it's online. So like
Mhm.
you're not with people, but we'll have a live chat running the whole time during the conference. So if there's a session happening, you can talk to each other. Just be nice, you know.
Yeah.
And we'll have several, like I said, both Q&As, a few different Q&As throughout, and then live panels on getting started. We're going to have a whole panel on how to get started homeschooling with very different viewpoints on that subject. And they're all pretty diverse viewpoints in each one. We're going to have a panel on homeschooling middle schoolers, panels on family dynamics. So we're going to have people with super small families, super large families. Like I think we have moms of 1 and like a mom of 12. So like we're going to have everything in between, and like military families and working full time outside the house while homeschooling. We're really trying to cram everything you need to know
Yeah.
to get started. And in fact, the day that your talk will be on Friday, I think,
Mhm.
that whole day is kind of a progression of every age of homeschooling. So
Cool.
preschoolers, toddlers, elementary, middle school, high school. We're going to have an expert on scholarship and college entrance exams and scholarship funds. Like, we want to help all the homeschool people or
Yeah.
the ones who want to. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. And tell us, what is the early bird price right now, and when does that end?
So the regular pricing will be $57 because that's super affordable. But during early bird, which ends Monday, I think we're going through the end of the day, Monday, July 15th. I have to look
Okay.
at a calendar, make sure that's right. Monday, July 15th will be the last day to get an early bird ticket at $37.
That's a great savings. And your community too. I mean, it's so affordable. So if you need some support as a homeschool mom, it's very well organized, very well done. I will not promote something unless I'm like, okay, they got it, like they get it, right? And again, like you said, it's very important that it's inclusive and not like not divisive, and like there's only one way to do things, right? So
Yeah, like whatever your methodology in homeschool and whatever your, whatever material or none you want to use as
mhm,
a homeschool parent, you're welcome there. And I would
yeah,
say, yeah, we're very obvious. Like our leadership and our contributor team, they're all like Christian parents, but like we're not exclusive to Christians. Like if you're a welcome here.
that's so
If
cool.
if you're a kind human being, you are welcome here
Yeah,
and you won't be made to feel othered.
that's
You're gonna hear
awesome.
about Jesus stuff, but like you're
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah. No, that's so cool. I learned early on, I mentioned unschooling in a video one time, and I was like, "Oh," I got shredded in the comments, and I'm like,
Mhm.
"Note to self, like, don't mention that again," you know?
We will have at the conference, there will be panels from classical educators and unschoolers.
Ooh, yeah, you really are going there. That's
I am.
awesome.
I'm going
You're,
pretty
like, putting
tight.
them all in a room, you're like, "Ah, let's see what happens."
Well, it's a death match. It's really wonderful. And that's how the community is too. And I would say, yeah, the community is super affordable. We do the most expensive plan is like $18.99 a month, but
Mm,
it's 15% off of that if you do an annual plan. We just want to get in front of people and help them.
yeah, that's so cool. Alright, I have one last question for
Yeah.
you then. What would you say to the woman, I'm gonna assume it's women because mostly women listen to us, but, if she's like, "Hey, I really wanna homeschool. My husband is not on board with it." What would you say to her?
Oh, I would say my advice for her would be the same as it would be for him if he were in that case. For either spouse, either parent, I would say go talk to them and have a communication matters and say, hey, my perception, make sure you don't say, hey, why don't you want us to homeschool? Don't do that. My perception is that you are not in favor of this. Or maybe you've talked about it and he said it or whatever, fine. But hey, can you help me understand what your concerns are? Because there's probably some miscommunication, some gap in trust, some gap in understanding somewhere. And then just listen to those concerns. Don't mitigate them. Don't say they're garbage. Don't say that doesn't matter. Don't disregard people's feelings, man or woman.
Mhm.
And hear them out. And there might be something in there that you don't realize has been a concern. And then say, thank you for sharing that with me. And if you don't have something kind and loving to come back with, say, let me think about that and come back to you.
Yeah.
And that's really lame, I know, but just
That is
talk
good.
to each other.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I like that because sometimes it is like, well, I'm afraid the house is going to be a mess all the time, or I'm
Yeah.
afraid, or I'm looking out for you. I think you're going to be, as my wife, you're going to be too stressed out by it, or, I've seen how our kids are at times, right? So I
Yeah.
think that's great to get everything out on the table, so at least you know what you're dealing with.
Yeah. I mean, respecting somebody isn't doing the thing you think they want.
Yeah,
Respecting
that's
somebody
good.
is hearing them out
Yeah, yeah, that's
and
good.
then addressing their concerns realistically, not with a straw man disagreement.
Hmm. Yeah, that's good. Awesome. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. And we will put links to all of that. And yeah, maybe even see you inside of the Made to Homeschool community as well.
I'm there all the time. Would love to meet you guys. Thanks, Don, for having me.